Puffy dresses are all classy and regal until you have to deal with layers and layers of clothing when going to the toilet or menstruating. Like many others, you must have wondered how women in the Middle Ages and pre-modern eras used the toilet with multiple layers of clothing. To the modern person, the idea seems impossible, but it was not nearly as complex as it may seem to you. In this video, we will reveal interesting information about toilet etiquette and the menstruation habits of women who wore heavy, puffy dresses. Though the dresses may seem pretty, the hygiene practices were substandard. Hold tight, because some of the information may make you jump out of your chair. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Those women would have wanted it that way. Layers of clothing. What made the dresses so fluffy? Let us break down the layers of clothing for you. Among many layers of clothing, the first piece of clothing women would put on was known as chemise or shift. It was a long and loose-fitting gown, much like a modern-day nightgown. Next came the split-crotch drawers, equivalent to underwear. Drawers were used to cover the bum. Next came the stockings, mostly knee-length, followed by shoes, of course. Women would also wear a corset, which provided bust support, a smooth silhouette, and an equal distribution of the garment's weight. This was followed by a shirt-like garment called a corset cover, or a chemisette, worn directly under the outer garment. Other options were petticoats, false sleeves, and skirts. If you pay attention, none of the clothing hinders a comfortable toilet journey. Not even a single layer of clothing blocks the ability of a woman to use the toilet. All the women in puffy dresses needed to do was lift up their dresses and unload. Oh, but what about the women who wore crinolines to hold out their skirts? To your surprise, crinolines are not as stiff as they may appear. In fact, crinolines are extremely malleable and lightweight. They could easily be squeezed to pass through narrow doorways or sit on the furniture. Now that you have fully understood how layering works, let's get into the ways women approached the toilet back then, and whether they were appropriate for fluffy dresses or not. Chamber pots. Chamber pots, aka commodes, were extremely easy to use. All a woman had to do was lift up her dress and push it against her back alongside the crinoline. Thanks to the drawer's split crotch style, the rest of the job was easy peasy lemon squeezy, pun intended. Another pretty hilarious yet creative way to use a commode was to approach it from the front, holding the dress and crinoline against the tummy and sitting down. Since the chamber pots were not fixed on the commodes, women could simply hold the chamber pot in their hands, rest a foot on the top of the chair, and hold the chamber pot underneath the skirts. The pots were emptied either in the river or in the streets. Looking for visual aids? Not at all decent. Just kidding. All of these methods were pretty common and convenient for women who wore puffy dresses. Where and how did the queens go potty? This was for all women in general. What did the queen do if she needed to use the restroom between residences? Even in these days of minimal difference, we see royalty as a distant and almost unhuman figure. Realistically speaking, queens and princesses had to use the toilet sometimes, despite their puffy dresses. How though? There were rooms specified as composting toilets, and the night soil men would remove the contents of the toilets and use them for composting elsewhere. During travel, tents and pavilions were brought along to provide accommodation and toilet facilities. It is important to note that people in the Middle Ages did not have running water, so they had to defecate in holes in the ground, and women were squat champions as they lifted up their layered up dresses and unloaded. Menstruation and puffy dresses, an unfriendly feat. Moving on to the menstruation part, how did that work? More layers of clothing, Let's see. While the drawers did an excellent job in the toilet, wearing just drawers during menstruation would not suffice. According to a recent study by Charles Delacina Meigs, women in the 1850s used to wear a T-bandage. What was a T-bandage? It was a piece of cloth folded like a cravat and tied around the hips with a string or a ribbon. Unfortunately, they did not absorb much and had to be changed from 12 to 20 times a day. Could you imagine the struggles of a Victorian woman? Shockingly, peasant women let the blood flow freely. Cloth was commonly worn by middle and upper class women. Tampons did exist, but they were not very common. To be honest, T-bandages and tampons were not at every woman's disposal. Rags were the most common way of dealing with menstruation. Rags were basically bundles of cloth piled up and placed between the legs up against the vagina. These rags needed to be washed and reused depending on the person's status and access. Periods are a fact of life, but little is talked about them. Do you ever wonder how women in the concentration camps cope with the most dire and extreme circumstances? Periods are a central part of a woman's experience, yet so many women faced issues related to menstruation in older times, especially when wearing layers and layers of puffy clothing. Menstruation was linked to the shame of bleeding in public and the discomfort of dealing with it. While we are still far from where we need to be to achieve period equity worldwide, our society has come a long way in terms of knowledge about menstruation and the products we use to manage our monthly cycle. Ancient attitudes were quite the opposite. As mentioned earlier, women had to go through a lot during their periods. This might strike you as a little silly, but the Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder was convinced that periods were some kind of magical sorcery. He wrote that periods destroyed fields and killed bees. Clearly he was wrong. It shows how much this topic was ignored. Women were not allowed to take painkillers for cramps, as it was considered their punishment. Hilariously, some women would burn a toad and wear its ashes around their waist for cramps. This must be making you feel really thankful for heating pads and ibuprofen right now, is it? From the 1890s on, sanitary belts were introduced, which were basically reusable pads attached to a belt worn around the waist. As uncomfortable as they sound, belts were bulky and leakage was common. Women have been managing their periods for millennia, but the way they do it has changed as menstruation has become less stigmatized over time. Today's woman has more freedom than ever before to explore her options and find the best period product that works the best for her and her body. Thanks for watching.